o'clock.
Well, I'm not used to this country air, Miss Fairfax. I stayed at the hotel in the village last night and hardly closed my eyes. Oh, made any headway, Doc?
Oh, yes. We've got your mystery cleared up for you, Mr. Fuller. It wasn't too difficult.
What? Why, this is incredible. You mean that you actually know who murdered Howard Holbrook?
No, but I know that my earlier conviction was right. Holbrook wasn't murdered.
Wasn't murdered? That doesn't make sense.
Why not? A man can die at least 2 ways besides being murdered, naturally or accidentally.
I know, but being buried in that...
Come into the library with us, Mr. Fuller, and I'll show you the final answer in the Encyclopedia National. Let's see now. M-A to N-E, N-E to P-E. Yes, here we are.
I wonder where Mrs. Holbrook is. She ought to be getting up by now.
Oh, I'm much more interested in what Danfield expects to find in that encyclopedia than I am in...
Owen Sound. Yes, here we are. Owls.
Owls?
What does it say, Dan?
Just what I expected it to say, Rusty. Listen. A mother owl will become vicious to a point of insanity if she thinks her offspring are in danger. At such times, they fear nothing, will attack any foe regardless of size. Their claws are like steel. Have an advantage because they are entirely soundless in flight.
Dan, then it was an owl that attacked us last night. We didn't see anything or hear anything.
That's right, Rusty. It was an owl that's responsible for the scar on Jason Dunstan's forehead.
On Jason Dunstan's forehead?
Yes, it was an unusually deep scar, made about a year ago, wouldn't you think?
Yes, but
Wait a minute, Doc. How does this business about the owls and scars on foreheads tie in with the murder of Howard Holbrook?
It's rather an elaborate plan for murder, Mr. Fuller, and most cleverly executed. I'll be glad to explain. Oh, come in, Mr. Dunstan. I rather expected you. Where's your partner in crime, Mrs. Holbrook?
Right here.
Oh.
You're clever, Danfield, but you're also a fool.
Dan, they've both got guns.
Naturally, they both have guns. Two people who are about to be proven guilty of murder would be expected to carry guns. Well?
You're a cool one, Danfield. What a pity that you went to all this trouble for nothing.
Oh, I didn't do it for nothing. I did it for $10,000.
$10,000, eh? Fuller, you must have been pretty sure of yourself to gamble that amount.
I was, but I still don't...
Of course you don't. You're not smart like Danfield. Go on, Doc. Give the guy his money's worth. Tell him how you worked it out.
I'll be glad to. When Howard Holbrook was in jail, his wife got the idea about the owls. She visited her husband and told him her plan. The day before Holbrook's liberation, she left for his sisters to establish her alibi. When Holbrook got home, the place was deserted. Using the net which we found in the barn, he captured the mother owl.
So that's why the net interested you so much.
Yes, Rusty. Mr. Holbrook then dipped the steel-like claws of the owl in a powerful poison called curare.
Poison? Then that's why Holbrook's body showed no signs of violence.
You're almost right, Mr. Fuller, but not quite. After poisoning the owl's claws, Holbrook released the bird and sat back to wait.
Yes? For what?
You know for what, Mr. Dunstan. For the arrival of his convict friend, Guy Emerson.
Well, then it was Guy Emerson who murdered Holbrook.
Oh, no, Rusty. It wasn't Guy Emerson who murdered Holbrook. In fact, it wasn't Holbrook who was murdered. It was Emerson.
What?
Well, then the corpse that was found wasn't that of Howard Holbrook at all.
That's right. The corpse was that of Guy Emerson. As a matter of fact, this gentleman here who is pointing the gun at me and who calls himself Jason Dunstan is actually Howard Holbrook. Oh, Mr. Fuller, did you tell your men to surround the place?
What? Surround?
Good. Rusty, step away from the window so the policeman can shoot, will you?
Howard, it's a trick!
Is it?
Right out, woman, Fuller. All right, Holbrook, you better shoot now while you got a chance.
Now back to Michael Dunn for the conclusion of Danger, Dr. Danfield.
Oh, come in, Mr. Fuller. Miss Fairfax and I were just about to leave. Is everything taken care of?
Yes, the local police department took them both away. Oh, by the way, Doc, before you leave, I'd like to hear the end of the story.
Well, there isn't a great deal more to tell. Holbrook obviously inveigled Guy Emerson to a spot near where the owl had its nest. The owl attacked, gouged Emerson about the face, and the poison took effect, killing him.
Then what?
Well, then Holbrook transferred his watch to Emerson's pocket and severed the third toe of his left foot. Afterward, he buried him out behind the garage.
And then Holbrook went to Chicago, called on his cousins, and announced he couldn't face society and was going to disappear.
Yes, that's right, Rusty. He stayed out of sight for a while and then returned to this town and bought the adjoining farm. No one recognized him because few people had ever seen him in this neighborhood and because his face was disfigured by the scar.
Well, I guess that explains everything. What got you to thinking along those lines, Dan?
Oh, a great many things, Rusty. But chiefly it was the ditch going in the wrong direction, the net in the barn, and the scar on Holbrook's face.
The scar?
Of course. It's not unlike the one on your face, Rusty, only his was deeper. Then I remembered that after we heard the shot last night, we no longer heard the hoot of the owl.
Holbrook shot the owl.
Yes. When Mrs. Holbrook knew we'd been attacked, she called her husband and told him to shoot the owl just in case we got suspicious.
Oh, and then when you saw the scar on Holbrook's face, you reasoned that he must have been attacked by the owl when he captured it through Dibbit's claws and poison.
Rusty, you're 100% right. You're always right. I don't know what I'd do without you. As a matter of fact, I don't intend to do without you. Now, come on, Rusty. We've got $10,000 to spend. Let's go.
Calling all detectives. There are many ways of inviting death, and being shot from a cannon is one of the surest. That is the situation on this page from my casebook. The casebook of Jerry Browning, private detective. Take it from me, Jerry Browning, private detective. Murder is one performance that doesn't bear repeating. I just put my money down at the ticket window at Colton's Colossal Circus when a voice behind me said, "Hold it! That man's money is counterfeit!" I spun around and faced Phil Gainey, whom I hadn't seen since college days. Phil grinned. "Your money's counterfeit at this box office, Jerry. Pass him." I grinned, too. "What's your job here, Phil?" "Boss supervisor? A house detective to the circus, you might call it." A tall, thin-lipped character sauntered past, waved at Phil, who grabbed him. "Hey, Windy, want you to meet an old school pal, Jerry Browning. Windy's our 24-hour man, Jerry. Travels a day in advance of the show, gets the lot, buys the provisions, puts us into business." Windy smiled acidly. "The chief makes it sound like a big job, Mr. Browning, but it isn't. Well, have fun." Inside the big top, the show moved smoothly and swiftly to its big climax, the cannon act of Challenge Colton, who was both the circus owner and top-billed performer. "Ladies and gentlemen, Challenge Colton will now defy death by being shot from a cannon higher and further than any human being has ever dared attempt." Dressed in a crash driver's suit and helmet, Colton came striding out, climbed into the cannon's muzzle. Several moments later, Colton's body arced through the air and landed heavily in the net. But he didn't rise for his bow or clamber out. Two clowns jumped into the net, picked up Colton, pulled him out, walked him off with exaggerated staggering and stumbling. They didn't fool me. Those clowns were carrying a dead man. The performer owner of a circus was shot from a cannon and landed dead. Phil Gainey, the circus detective, had left right after the act. A couple of minutes later, he came back. "Is Colton gone?" Phil nodded tightly. "Yeah. We're cutting the show short. Closing right after these Joeys get through." The Joeys are circus clowns, named after Joe Grimaldi, the most famous clown of them all. There were two Joeys in the main ring now, the same pair who'd carried Colton out of the net. One of them was a huge man wearing an inflated chest and enormous rubber shoulder muscles. The other was a tiny man. The big man pushed the little man around, abused him, and finally the little man took a huge revolver from his pocket and shot the big man. The big man's fake chest collapsed and he sank to the ground. Then the little man grabbed the bully by the legs and dragged him off. This time even Phil couldn't keep me in my seat. "Phil, come on, you've got another dead man on your hands." We pushed our way outside. The circus doctor was bending over the body of the clown, still dressed in his bully's costume. "There's nothing I can do. This man was shot to death." Phil grabbed the little clown. "You always were jealous of Eric. You'll get the chair for this." The little man was too shocked to answer, but I had some ideas on the subject. "Look, Phil, I'm a detective, too, and I've got a hunch that this death may be mixed up with Colton's death in the Cannon Act." An hour later, most of the top circus people were at police headquarters. Toby, the little clown charged with murder, was in a cell. Phil Gainey, Windy, the advance man, and the circus treasurer were arguing with the police commissioner for permission to take the circus out of town the following evening.
There's been 2 murders, and I'm not satisfied with the accounts of how Colton died in that cannon. I'm sorry for you people, but you'll have to stay in town for the time being.
After the commissioner walked out, I looked at the 3 circus men. Is this going to hurt you people? Phil smiled wryly.
It'll just about put us out of business, Jerry. The circus has a big payroll. It can't sit idle very long.
Windy, the advance man, got up.
Well, it's sure been nice knowing you folks. I'm going on ahead. Phone me when we get permission to move.
I turned to Phil.
Where's he going? Up ahead to the next town. The circus can't get there as scheduled. Windy'll have a lot of changes to make. Food orders to cancel or postpone. I don't envy him.
I stared at the door. I don't either. Especially when the commissioner finds out that Windy didn't consider himself included in that don't leave town order. A circus lot, settled down for the night, is a place of strange shadows and weird sounds. Silent figures flitting around tent ropes, animals coughing and stirring in their cages. Phil Gainey pointed out the huge shrouded bulk of the cannon from which Colton had been flung to his death.
Most of the gadgets are propped, Jerry. It's just a big spring that propels him out. The flash of fire and the explosion take place outside.
Yeah, but the coroner says he was asphyxiated, smothered to death. How do you account for that? Phil shrugged.
I don't know. Maybe gases leaked back into the cannon from the flash powder.
Maybe. And maybe a real bullet leaked into the gun that little clown fired. But I don't believe that either. Back at police headquarters, I had a talk with Toby, the clown who'd been charged with murder.
Yeah, Mr. Browning. When Eric and I pulled Mr. Colton out of the net, his hands and face was ice cold. I remember Eric saying Mr. Colton was froze to death, like...
All right, Toby. That's all I wanted to know. A police patrol picked up Windy on the highway. They put him under arrest, brought him back on the technical charge of being a fugitive material witness. But when I faced him, Windy, you bought a quantity of dry ice this morning, and none of it was used on the circus grounds. What happened to it?
I decided it was dangerous stuff. Threw it in a creek.
It's dangerous, all right. But you put it in the cannon so that the carbon dioxide fumes would asphyxiate Colton. Yeah? He finally broke down. As advance man, he'd handled circus funds, mishandled them mostly, and was on the verge of being exposed, unless he managed to kill off Colton. He might have got away with the crime, but he tried to play it too safe by killing one of the clowns who'd noticed how unnaturally icy Colton's body had been, and by having the other clown charged with murder. And that was just too pat. Like I said, murder is nothing to clown about, because the law always manages to have the last laugh.
This is WGN, Chicago 11.
That's Danger, Dr. Danfield from December 8th, 1946, with a $100,000 life insurance claim starring Michael Dunn.
You know, you can see a fun fact about Michael Dunn and Danger Dr. Danfield on our Facebook page with a photo of him. Check it out at WGN Radio Theatre on Facebook.
Yes, indeed. All right, let's take a quick break. Then it's more on the WGN Radio Theatre.